A 55-year-old bride was left at the station, her trunk at her feet, her heart broken, and the whole town whispering. Humiliation burned hotter than the summer dust, until a quiet Amish man stepped out of the crowd. He didn't just offer her shelter, he offered something far greater. But on the frontier, nothing comes without a price. Just as hope sparks between them, a ruthless railroad lays claim to his land. A hidden document, a midnight fire, and neighbors too afraid to speak. Suddenly, their fragile happiness hangs by a thread. She's too old to start again. He's too gentle to fight. Yet both stand on the edge of losing everything. Will this abandoned bride and this silent farmer uncover the truth in time? Or will the railroad's greed bury their chance at forever? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The July sun beat down mercilessly on the wooden platform of the Colorado train station. Lily Hale shifted her weight from one aching foot to the other, her trunk growing heavier by the minute. Her bonnet offered little comfort against the scorching heat, but she kept her chin high, scanning the faces of every man who passed by. The mechanical click of the station clock marked each passing hour. Morning stretched into afternoon, and still, no one came for her. Her promised groom, a man she'd corresponded with for months, was nowhere to be seen. The weight of her carpet bag pulled at her shoulder, matching the growing heaviness in her heart. A group of young boys loitering near the water barrel pointed in her direction, their Snickers carrying across the platform. "Reckon she got stood up," one whispered loudly enough for her to hear. Heat rose in Lily's cheeks, but she kept her gaze fixed straight ahead, pretending not to notice. The station master, a man with graying temples and kind eyes, had passed by several times. Each time, his headshake grew more pronounced, his expression more pitying. "Ma'am," he finally said, touching the brim of his cap. "Last train east leaves at sundown, if you're wanting to head back." Lily's throat tightened. "Much obliged," she managed to say, though her voice wavered. 55 years old, and here she sat, made a fool of like some green girl at her first dance. The thought of returning home to face her neighbors' knowing looks and whispered sympathy was almost unbearable. The sun dipped lower, painting the dusty street in shades of amber. One by one, lamps flickered to life in the shop windows along Main Street. The last passengers from the afternoon train had long since dispersed, leaving Lily alone with her trunk, her carpet bag, and her wounded pride. In the distance, a whistle pierced the evening air. The eastbound train, right on schedule. Lily's hands trembled as she reached for her bag. The thought of climbing aboard, of admitting defeat, made her stomach churn. "Excuse me, Mom." The voice was soft, barely above a whisper. Lily looked up to find a broad-shouldered man standing before her, his plain black hat and full beard marking him as Amish. His eyes were kind beneath the brim of his hat, though they held their own measure of sadness. "I couldn't help but notice you've been waiting here since morning," he said, his words careful and measured. "I'm Justin Yoder." He paused, seeming to choose his next words with care. "A widower, these past 3 years." Lily's hands tightened on her carpet bag. The man's presence was solid, steady, like an oak tree offering shade on a scorching day. His clothes were plain but clean, his manner gentle despite his imposing height. "I'm Lily Hale," she replied, her voice stronger than she felt. "And it seems I've been—" The words stuck in her throat. "Left waiting." Justin finished for her, saving her from having to say it herself. He glanced at the setting sun, then back to her face. "My farm's just outside town. There's a spare room if you need a place to stay while you sort things out." The whistle sounded again, closer now. Lily looked down the tracks, seeing the smoke from the approaching train. Then she looked back at Justin Yoder, studying his weathered face. There was nothing improper in his manner, nothing to suggest anything but genuine concern. "I don't want charity," she said firmly, though her voice softened at his slight flinch. "It ain't charity, Mrs. Hale, just one Christian helping another." He gestured to her trunk. "And truth be told, I could use some help with the preserving. Got more fruit than I can manage alone." The train was pulling into the station now, steam hissing, brakes squealing. Lily felt the moment stretch like pulled taffy, return east to certain humiliation, or trust this quiet stranger with the gentle eyes. "Your spare room," she said finally. "Does it have a window?" Justin's beard twitched in what might have been a smile. "Faces east, gets the morning light." The train conductor called out, "All aboard!" As Justin reached for Lily's trunk, his movements were unhurried, respectful, giving her time to change her mind if she wished. But Lily had already made her decision. She stood, straightening her skirts, and picked up her carpet bag. "Thank you, Mr. Yoder," she said quietly. "I believe I'll accept your offer." Together they walked away from the platform as the eastbound train pulled out of the station, its whistle fading into the gathering dusk. Lily felt the stares of the townspeople following them, but for the first time that day, she didn't mind. Sometimes, she thought, help comes from the most unexpected places. Justin lifted Lily's heavy trunk with practiced ease, carrying it to a simple buckboard wagon parked in the shade of a cottonwood tree. A grey mare stood quietly in the traces, her ears flicking at flies. The horse's calm demeanor matched her owner's steady presence as Justin carefully settled the trunk in the wagon bed. "This here's Martha," he said, patting the mare's weathered neck. "She ain't fancy, but she's faithful." Lily settled onto the wooden seat, smoothing her skirts and gripping her carpet bag tightly in her lap. The leather was worn smooth from her nervous handling throughout the long day. Justin climbed up beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them as he took up the reins. As they rolled down the dusty main street, Lily felt the weight of watching eyes. Two women outside the general store bent their heads together, whispering behind raised hands. "Old maid," drifted clearly to Lily's ears, followed by "Amish stranger." Her cheeks burned, but she kept her gaze forward, though her knuckles whitened on the carpet bag. Justin seemed untouched by the gossip, his hands steady on the reins as Martha plodded along. The silence between them stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. More thoughtful, like the pause between prayer and amen. "I came west 3 years ago," Justin said finally, his voice quiet but clear above the wagon's creaking. "There were raids back in Pennsylvania. Men burning Amish farms, thinking we were sympathizing with the wrong side." He paused, pain flickering across his features. "I lost my wife Sarah in one of those fires. After that, I couldn't stay. Needed to find peace somewhere new." Lily's heart ached at the grief in his voice. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. He nodded once, acknowledging her sympathy without dwelling on it. They passed the one-room church, its white-painted boards glowing in the late afternoon light. The sheriff's office stood next door, and Lily noticed Sheriff Hanley watching them from his doorway, his expression unreadable beneath his drooping mustache. The telegraph office's familiar clicking sound reminded Lily sharply of the message she'd received just 2 weeks ago, the one promising marriage and a new life. How foolish she'd been to believe it. But what choice did she have, really? A widow with no children and no prospects back home. Justin guided the wagon onto a rutted road leading out of town. The way grew rougher, Martha picking her path carefully around stones and washouts. As twilight settled over the land like a purple shawl, They crested a small rise. Below them stretched Justin's homestead, modest but well-tended, with neat fencing and an orchard of young fruit trees marching in orderly rows across the gentle slope. The farmhouse was simple but solid, built of weathered logs with a stone chimney. Smoke curled upward into the darkening sky, and lamplight glowed warmly through the windows. "I lit the stove before I went to town," Justin explained as he helped Lily down from the wagon. "Had a feeling I might have company tonight." Inside, the house was plain but clean, with a few pieces of carefully crafted furniture that spoke of Justin's skill with wood. He moved surely through the kitchen, ladling up bowls of fragrant stew and setting out thick slices of golden cornbread. Lily sat at the scrubbed wooden table, shame washing over her anew as she realized the extent of her situation. "Mr. Yoder," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't know how to thank you properly. You've shown such kindness to a stranger." Justin settled into the chair across from her, his movements deliberate and calm. "Mrs. Hale," he said quietly, "you are not a burden, only an answer." His dark eyes met hers with simple sincerity. "I've been praying for guidance these past months. Perhaps the Lord sent you today for a reason." Lily felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen. There was no pity in his gaze, no judgment, only a quiet understanding that brought unexpected tears to her eyes. She blinked them back quickly and reached for the cornbread, finding comfort in its simple warmth. The evening settled around them like a soft blanket as they shared their meal, the silence between them now comfortable and filled with possibility. Outside, a whip-poor-will called into the gathering darkness, and somewhere in the orchard, crickets began their evening song. Dawn painted the eastern sky in soft rose and gold as roosters announced the morning with their persistent crowing. Lily blinked awake in the spare bedroom, momentarily confused by the unfamiliar surroundings. A patchwork quilt lay neatly folded at her feet, its careful stitching catching the early light. The room was simple, a plain wooden dresser, a washstand with a ceramic basin, and curtains that stirred gently in the morning breeze. The floorboards creaked softly beneath her feet as she dressed, smoothing her hair and pinning it carefully. Through the window, she could see Justin already moving about the farmyard, his tall figure outlined against the brightening sky. In the kitchen, he had coffee brewing and cornmeal mush warming on the wood stove. "Good morning," he said, looking up from where he sat at the table, a well-worn Bible open before him. "I trust you slept well?" "Very well, thank you," Lily replied, settling into the chair he pulled out for her. The coffee was strong and hot, its familiar comfort helping to settle her nerves about what the day might bring. As they ate, Justin explained the rhythm of his farm days. "The orchard needs constant tending," he said, gesturing through the window toward the neat rows of young fruit trees. "There's pruning, checking for pests, making sure the irrigation ditches run clear. Then there's the livestock to tend to, and always tools needing mending." Lily set down her coffee cup. "I'd like to help," she offered, though uncertainty colored her voice. "It's been many years since I worked on a farm, but I remember the basics." Justin nodded, a quiet approval in his eyes. "We can start simple," he said, rising from the table. He returned with a worn basket, its handle smooth from years of use. "The chickens need checking. About 12 hens in the coop behind the barn." The morning air was crisp as Justin showed her around the barn, its weathered boards glowing amber in the early light. Inside, a gentle-eyed milk cow looked up from her hay, and 2 woolly sheep bleated a greeting from their pen. "This here's Betsy," Justin said, patting the cow's broad flank. "She gives good milk, though she can be particular about who does the milking." The sheep pressed against their gate, curious about the visitor. and these two are Mary and Martha. They keep the grass down and provide wool for winter. Lily spent the morning learning the property, collecting eggs from nests still warm beneath clucking hens, filling water troughs, and helping Justin check the young apple trees. By midday, her dress was dusty, and sweat dampened her collar, but satisfaction warmed her chest. Each gathered egg and completed task felt like a small victory, a step away from yesterday's humiliation. As the sun began its westward slide, Lily took charge of the kitchen. The familiar routine of cooking brought comfort, measuring flour for biscuits, seasoning beans, slicing ham. The kitchen filled with savory aromas as she worked, and when Justin came in from the barn, his appreciation was genuine. "This smells like heaven itself," he said, washing up at the pump by the back door. "It's been a long while since anyone but me did the cooking." They ate together in companionable quiet, broken only by the distant lowing of cattle and the evening songs of meadowlarks. As dusk approached, hoofbeats on the road drew their attention. Through the window, Lily could see a wagon passing slowly, its occupants turning to stare at the farmhouse. She recognized the miller's wife and daughter, their faces bright with curiosity. Heat rose in Lily's cheeks. "They'll be talking about me in town," she said softly, her hands twisting in her apron. "Let them talk," Justin replied, his voice steady. "The Lord knows the truth of things." When darkness settled fully, Justin lit the lamp and opened his Bible. Lily sat in the rocking chair by the fire, her mending in her lap, as his deep voice filled the room with ancient words of comfort. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures." The familiar psalm wrapped around her like a warm blanket. In the firelight, watching Justin's weathered hands turn the pages with reverence, Lily felt the tight knot of fear in her chest begin to loosen. Here, in this simple room, with its flickering shadows and sacred words, she felt something she hadn't expected to find after stepping off that train. Safety. The evening wrapped them in peaceful quiet, broken only by the pop of the fire and the distant cry of a coyote. For the first time since receiving that false promise of marriage, Lily felt her shoulders truly relax. Whatever tomorrow might bring, tonight she was sheltered, respected, and at peace. A week slipped by like water in a stream, each day bringing new rhythms to the farm. The late summer sun painted everything in golden hues as Lily settled into the routine of country life. Her hands, once soft from town living, grew calloused from the rope of the well bucket. Every morning she hauled water for the kitchen and animals, her muscles growing stronger with each passing day. In the farmhouse kitchen, she sat by lamplight, mending Justin's work shirts with careful stitches. The familiar task brought comfort, though the heavy canvas was different from the delicate fabrics she'd known before. Justin noticed her handiwork one evening, running a weathered finger along a particularly neat seam. "Fine stitching," he said simply, but his eyes held appreciation. Out in the barn, Justin showed patience as Lily learned to handle Star, the steady plow horse. "Gentle now," he'd say, demonstrating how to hold the reins. "She'll respond better to a soft touch than a harsh one." The horse seemed to sense Lily's nervousness, turning her broad head to nuzzle Lily's shoulder encouragingly. On market day, they hitched the wagon for the trip into town. The morning air was crisp, hinting at the coming fall. Justin sat straight on the wagon seat, his black hat shading his eyes, while Lily smoothed her best dress and adjusted her bonnet. The wagon wheels creaked a steady rhythm on the dusty road. "At the Mercantile, mister." Henderson's bell tinkled as they entered. The shopkeeper nodded to Justin with his usual politeness. "Morning, Mr. Yoder, your usual order." "Yes, and some extra sugar if you have it," Justin replied. Mr. Henderson's eyes slid to Lily, his smile thinning. Interesting to see you've taken in company, he said, his tone making the word sound unsavory. Quite charitable of you, considering. Lily busied herself examining a bolt of calico, her cheeks burning. Outside the store's dusty window, Mrs. Peterson and Mrs. Miller stood with their heads together, not bothering to lower their voices. She's far too old to be starting fresh, Mrs. Peterson declared. Why, she must be past 55 if she's a day. Living under an unmarried man's roof at her age. Mrs. Miller added, It's just not proper. Lily's hands trembled as she set down the fabric. The shame of her failed marriage prospect still stung, made sharper by their cruel words. But then she felt Justin's steady hand on her arm, warm and protective through her sleeve. Pay them no mind, he said quietly. Their words carry no weight with the Lord. They loaded their purchases into the wagon, the routine task helping Lily steady her nerves. As they passed the white-painted church, something caught her eye. Justin, she said, touching his sleeve. Look there. An official-looking paper was nailed to the church door, its edges fluttering in the breeze. They stopped the wagon, and Lily climbed down to read it. Her heart sank as she took in the formal language. It's from the railroad company, she said, her voice tight with concern. They're claiming rights to your orchard land. They say it's needed for the new expansion. Justin's normally gentle face hardened as he read the notice. His jaw tightened beneath his beard, and Lily saw a flash of something like fear in his eyes before it was replaced by determination. I filed the land patent years ago, he explained, his voice low but steady. Paid my fees, followed every rule. But the railroad has deep pockets and friends in high places. They've been pushing folks off their land all along the planned route. The ride home was heavy with worried silence. The cheerful morning had turned grey, though no clouds crossed the sky. Lily watched Justin's hands on the reins, noting how tightly he gripped them. That evening, after the chores were done and the lamps lit, Lily knelt by her bedside. The weight of the day pressed down on her shoulders, and she found herself speaking her prayers aloud. Lord, she whispered, grant us strength for what's ahead. Show us the path through this valley. Protect this good man's land, this place that's become a sanctuary to me. She heard quiet footsteps, and then Justin's deep voice joined hers. Amen. In the soft lamplight, their shadows merged on the wall, two people brought together by circumstance, now facing a common threat. The railroad's claim loomed over them like storm clouds on the horizon, but in that moment of shared prayer, they found a measure of peace. The days stretched into weeks as summer's heat mellowed into autumn's gentle warmth. Life on Justin's homestead found its own quiet rhythm, like a familiar hymn played on well-worn strings. Each morning, Lily's humming drifted through the yard as she pinned clean sheets to the clothesline, her voice mixing with the rustle of cottonwood leaves. Justin worked nearby, his hands moving steadily as he mended the split-rail fences, testing each post with careful attention. From her place by the laundry, Lily watched him work. His movements were sure and practiced, each strike of the hammer precise. Though they often worked in companionable silence, she had grown to read his moods like weather signs, the tilt of his head, the set of his shoulders, the pace of his steps. When Sunday arrived, they prepared for church with special care. Lily smoothed her best dress and adjusted her bonnet, while Justin brushed his black coat free of dust. The wagon ride into town was quiet, both of them aware of the eyes that would soon be upon them. As they entered the white-painted church, the morning sunlight streaming through tall windows, conversations hushed. Heads turned, and whispers followed them down the aisle like autumn leaves skittering across wooden floors. Poor man, taking in strays at his age. Mrs. Peterson murmured behind her hymnal. Charitable to a fault, agreed Mrs. Miller, though one wonders about his peculiar ways, never did trust those Amish notions. Lily held her head high, though her cheeks burned. She had started to move toward the back pews when Justin touched her elbow gently. "Sit with me," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the hushed sanctuary. "Here, near the front." Pride bloomed in Lily's chest, warm as summer sunshine, as she settled beside him on the polished wooden pew. His simple gesture spoke volumes, declaring to all that she was not a charity case, but a companion worthy of respect. The service proceeded with familiar rhythms, prayers, hymns, scripture readings. Lily sang with a full heart, her voice joining Justin's deep bass in the old songs of praise. She noticed how he knew every verse by heart, his faith as natural as breathing. After the final "Amen," as the congregation filed out into the autumn sunshine, Reverend Matthews drew Justin aside. Lily pretended to adjust her shawl, staying close enough to hear their conversation. "Brother Yoder," the preacher said, his voice low and concerned, "I've heard about the railroad's claim on your land. Sometimes the Lord asks us to yield rather than fight." Justin's shoulders stiffened beneath his black coat. "The land is rightfully mine, Reverend. Filed and paid for. Prayer is a powerful tool," Reverend Matthews continued, "but against the railroad's lawyers." He shook his head. "Just consider what battles are worth fighting, brother." The wagon ride home was heavy with silence. Justin's hands were tight on the reins, his eyes fixed on the dusty road ahead. The clip-clop of hooves marked time with their troubled thoughts. As evening settled over the homestead, cicadas began their nightly chorus in the orchard. Lily found Justin sitting on the porch steps, staring out at his threatened land. The apple trees stood like silent sentinels in the gathering dusk, their branches heavy with ripening fruit. She settled beside him, careful to leave proper space between them. "That orchard is more than just trees," she said softly. "It's your home, your future." "The railroad has power," Justin replied, his voice heavy. "Money. Influence." He paused, running a hand over his beard. "I left Pennsylvania to avoid conflict, to find peace." "Sometimes peace must be defended," Lily said, her voice gentle but firm. "The Lord calls us to stand against injustice, even when it's difficult." She turned to face him fully. "You're not alone in this fight, Justin." He met her gaze, and in the fading light she saw something shift in his expression, like a candle being lit in a dark room. "I fear what conflict might bring," he admitted. "But you speak truth about justice." Without discussion, they both knelt there on the wooden porch. The evening air was sweet with apple blossoms and fresh-cut hay as their prayers rose together in the gathering darkness. "Lord," Lily prayed, her voice steady, "grant us wisdom and courage. Help us stand firm in what is right." "Guide our path," Justin added, his deep voice blending with hers. "Show us the way through this valley." As they rose, Justin's face showed new resolve. Lily saw that her words had kindled something in him, not anger or bitterness, but a quiet determination to stand firm in faith and justice. Together they watched the first stars appear above the threatened orchard, their shared prayers still echoing in the peaceful evening air. The bell above the mercantile door chimed as Lily stepped inside, her shopping basket tucked in the crook of her arm. Late afternoon sunlight filtered through the dusty windows, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. She made her way to the sewing notions, carefully selecting spools of sturdy brown thread for mending Justin's work shirts. Mrs. Peterson stood at the counter, examining calico fabric and casting sideways glances at Lily. Her whispered comments to the shopkeeper carried just far enough. Living under his roof, and them not even properly courting. Lily straightened her shoulders and focused on her task, refusing to let the gossip sting. As she approached the counter to pay, the young telegraph operator, Tommy Jenkins, bumped into her. His face was flushed, his eyes darting nervously around the store. "Beg pardon, ma'am," he mumbled, steadying her basket. His trembling hands slipped something into the folds of her shawl. Before she could respond, he whispered urgently, "You didn't see me," and hurried out the door. Lily's heart quickened, but she kept her expression neutral as she paid for her thread. The hidden paper seemed to burn against her side all the way home. She waited until she was safely inside the farmhouse before pulling out the carefully folded document. The afternoon light streaming through the kitchen windows illuminated official stamps and flowing script. Her hands shook as she read the detailed description of property boundaries and Justin's clear signature at the bottom. This was his original land patent, proof of legal ownership that should have been filed at the county office. The screen door creaked, and Justin's heavy boots sounded on the porch. He stepped into the kitchen, his face and shirt dusty from working in the orchard. "Lily, what's troubling you?" She held out the document. "The telegraph operator slipped this to me at the store." "Look." Justin wiped his hands on his trousers before taking the paper. His eyes widened as he read, and he sank slowly into a kitchen chair. "This is my patent." The one they claimed was never filed. His voice was barely above a whisper. Someone hid this deliberately. Lily poured them both cups of cool water from the ceramic pitcher. "Someone in town must have taken it from the records," she said, sitting across from him. "Someone who stands to profit from the railroad's plans." Justin's weathered hands smoothed the creased paper. "Sheriff Hanley," he said slowly. "He's been mighty friendly with those railroad surveyors. Always inviting them to dinner, riding out to their camp." He shook his head. "But to hide legal documents, we need to be careful," Lily cautioned, leaning forward. "That young man risked his position to get this to us. We can't act rashly and put him in danger." She watched Justin's face, seeing the struggle between his desire for justice and his peaceful nature. "We need more proof before we confront anyone." The kitchen grew darker as the sun set, throwing long shadows across the wooden table. Justin lit the oil lamp, its warm glow creating a gentle circle of light around them. They sat in thoughtful silence, the patent lying between them like a bridge across uncertain waters. "You've given me hope today," Justin said finally, his voice soft in the lamplight. "I was ready to accept defeat, to yield as the preacher suggested." He looked up at her, his eyes bright with something more than just gratitude. "Your courage, it reminds me there's still good in this world." Lily felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the summer evening. She saw Justin's hand move slightly across the table toward hers, then stop, held back by years of Amish reserve and careful propriety. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken words. She understood his hesitation and respected it, though her own hand tingled with the urge to bridge that small distance. Instead, she smiled gently and began planning their next steps, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her chest. The lamp flickered as night settled fully around the farmhouse. Through the open window came the sound of crickets and the distant lowing of cattle. The patent lay before them, a simple piece of paper that changed everything, not just their fight for the land, but something deeper, something growing between them as steady and sure as the crops in Justin's fields. They sat together in that pool of lamplight, no longer just a landlord and his boarder, but partners in a cause that was bringing them closer with each passing day. The evening air grew cool, carrying the sweet scent of ripening apples from the threatened orchard. But inside the kitchen, hope burned warm and bright. Lily stood in Justin's kitchen, surrounded by the sweet aroma of fresh-baked pies cooling on the windowsill. Her fingers, dusted with flour, smoothed the last handwritten invitation. She had spent 3 days preparing, determined to show the town that Justin's farm was more than just disputed land. It was the heart of a community. The morning sun streamed through the windows as she worked, casting golden light across the wooden table where loaves of bread rose under clean cloths. In the corner, a stack of quilts waited, each one stitched with care during quiet evenings. Their patterns told stories: wedding ring, Jacob's ladder, and North Star, designs that spoke of connection and hope. Justin paused in the doorway, his expression uncertain. "You reckon folks will come?" he asked, twisting his hat in his hands. "They'll come," Lily assured him, her voice steady despite her own flutter of nerves. Good food and friendship have a way of bringing people together. As evening approached, they transformed the barn. Lily directed Justin in hanging lanterns from the rafters, their light casting warm circles in the gathering dusk. Fresh hay scattered on the swept floor filled the air with summer sweetness. They arranged tables in a horseshoe, covered with her best quilts as tablecloths. The first wagon arrived just as the sun touched the horizon. More followed, bringing families from farms near and far. Lily stood at the barn door, greeting each arrival with genuine warmth. Mrs. Peterson, who had whispered about her in the mercantile, found herself smiling back at Lily's welcome. The Cooper children ran straight to the dessert table, their mother calling after them with fond exasperation. "Mighty fine spread you've laid out," Sheriff Hanley commented, his eyes sharp despite his pleasant tone. Lily met his gaze steadily, offering him a slice of apple pie while noting how he studied the barn's contents, as if measuring its worth. The barn filled with the murmur of conversation and the clinking of plates. Justin moved among his neighbors with quiet dignity, shaking hands and accepting pats on the back. When he stood to speak, the crowd hushed. "I'm much obliged to see you all here," he began, his voice soft but carrying to every corner. "The Lord teaches us that community is a blessing, and tonight I feel truly blessed." He glanced at Lily, drawing strength from her encouraging nod. "This land, this orchard, they're not just mine. They're part of what makes us neighbors, what makes us friends." Heads nodded around the tables. Even those who had come to gossip found themselves moved by his simple sincerity. Someone called out, "Here, here!" and others joined in with approval. The Mitchell boys brought out their fiddles after the meal, and soon the barn rang with music. Children danced between the tables while their parents tapped their feet and clapped. Lily watched as Mrs. Cooper drew Justin into a conversation about apple grafting, and the blacksmith's wife asked for her bread recipe. Through it all, Lily felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the summer evening. She saw how people looked at her differently now, not with pity or judgment, but with respect. She was no longer the abandoned bride on the platform, but a woman who could create this, an evening of joy and connection. As the stars emerged and families began to leave, each goodbye came with a handshake or embrace. "You must share that pie recipe," Mrs. Peterson insisted, squeezing Lily's hand. "And perhaps you might join our sewing circle next Wednesday." The last wagon disappeared down the dark road, leaving Justin and Lily standing in the doorway of the now quiet barn. Lantern light spilled around them, and the night air carried the lingering scent of hay and happiness. "I never thought—" Justin began, then paused, searching for words. "You've brought light to this place," he finally whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Lily's heart quickened at the tenderness in his tone. She turned to face him, seeing in his eyes something that made her breath catch, a warmth that spoke of more than gratitude. Their gazes held for a long moment, neither willing to look away first. Finally, Justin cleared his throat softly. "We should get some rest," he said, though he made no move to step back. "Yes," Lily agreed, equally reluctant to break the moment. "There'll be dishes to wash tomorrow." They parted slowly, each step measured, each backward glance filled with unspoken feelings. The night wrapped around them like a quilt, warm and full of promise, as they walked to their separate doors in the starlight. The morning after the gathering dawned bright and clear. Lily stepped out onto the porch, breathing in the crisp air that held just a hint of autumn's approach. The orchard stretched before her, its branches heavy with ripening apples. A recent storm had left its mark. Broken limbs and scattered twigs dotted the neat rows of trees. Justin emerged from the barn, carrying 2 pruning saws. "Thought we might tend to those damaged branches today," he said, handing her one of the tools. His fingers brushed hers for just a moment, and Lily felt that familiar flutter in her chest. They worked side by side through the morning hours. Justin showed her how to make clean cuts that would help the trees heal, his hands steady and sure as he demonstrated the technique. Lily proved a quick study, and soon they fell into an easy rhythm, sawing, clearing, moving on to the next tree. "These trees," Justin said during a water break, wiping his brow with a handkerchief. "They're strong. Like people, they can weather storms if they're tended right." He gazed thoughtfully across the orchard. "Been thinking we could plant another row come spring. And your quilts? Folks at the gathering were mighty impressed. Reckon the mercantile would be glad to sell them." Lily's heart warmed at his use of we. She watched him return to work, noting how the sunlight caught his silver-streaked beard, how his movements showed both strength and gentleness. More and more she found herself studying him this way, seeing not just the quiet farmer who had offered her shelter, but a man whose presence filled her days with purpose and joy. As evening approached, they finished the last of the repairs. Justin insisted on washing up before supper, saying he had something on his mind he wanted to discuss. Lily prepared a simple meal of cornbread and stew, trying not to let her imagination run wild with possibilities. After they ate, Justin suggested they sit on the porch. Fireflies had begun their nightly dance over the yard, their gentle lights blinking like floating stars. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the crickets' evening chorus. Finally, Justin turned to face her. "Lily," he began, his voice soft but steady. "I've been doing a powerful lot of thinking lately. About the future. About—" He paused, gathering his courage. "About us." Lily's hands stilled in her lap. Her heart seemed to pause between beats. "When you first arrived here," he continued, "I thought I was just offering shelter to someone in need. But the Lord works in mysterious ways." He looked down at his calloused hands. "You've brought something back to this place, and to me, that I thought was gone forever. Joy, purpose, the courage to stand firm against what's wrong." "Justin," Lily whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I know I'm just a plain man," he said, "an Amish widower with contested land and simple ways. But if you'd consider—" He took a deep breath. "If you'd consider sharing more than just this porch with me, being more than just a friend." Tears welled in Lily's eyes as the words she'd been holding in her heart finally found voice. "I love you," she said simply. "I've grown to love everything about you. Your gentleness, your faith, the way you care for this land and its creatures." Justin's eyes shone in the gathering dusk. "Then, would you consider marriage?" "Not right away," he added quickly. "We should wait until this business with the railroad is settled." "But knowing you might be willing, yes." Lily said, her smile bright even through her tears. Yes, I would consider it. I would welcome it. Justin reached over and took her hand, his touch reverent and warm. They sat together as darkness settled fully over the land, watching the fireflies and sharing quiet words about possible futures, about expanding the orchard, about teaching neighborhood children to quilt, about facing whatever challenges came their way together. When the evening chill finally drove them inside, they parted at their respective doors with shy smiles and tender glances. Lily prepared for bed slowly, her mind full of the evening's revelations. She knelt beside her bed, clasping her hands in prayer. "Thank you, Lord," she whispered into the darkness. "Thank you for leading me here, for this second chance at love. Thank you for showing me that life can bloom again, even in autumn." She touched her cheek, where happy tears still lingered. "Thank you for Justin's gentle heart, and for helping mine to heal and love again." She climbed into bed, pulling up the quilt she'd made during those first uncertain weeks on the farm. Its pattern, wedding ring, seemed especially fitting now. As sleep began to overtake her, Lily smiled, feeling truly at peace for the first time since stepping off that train so many weeks ago. Lily woke with a start, her throat burning. Thick smoke seeped under her bedroom door like ghostly fingers reaching into the darkness. For a moment she thought she was dreaming, until the acrid smell jolted her fully awake. "Fire!" Justin's voice boomed through the house. Heavy footsteps thundered down the hallway. Her door burst open, and there he stood in his nightclothes, face urgent in the dim light. "Lily, we must go, now!" She grabbed her shawl and rushed after him. The smoke grew denser as they descended the stairs, making her eyes water. Justin's strong hand guided her through the haze and out onto the front porch. What she saw made her gasp in horror. The barn was engulfed in flames. Fire reached toward the night sky like demons' fingers, painting everything in hellish orange. The heat hit her face like a physical blow. Beside her, Justin let out a strangled cry and ran toward the inferno. "The animals!" he shouted. "I must save them!" Lily's heart pounded as she watched him disappear into the smoke. In the distance, lanterns bobbed as neighbors began arriving, drawn by the glow against the clouds. Their shouts seemed far away as she focused on the barn entrance, praying for Justin's return. "Bring water!" someone yelled. A bucket line formed from the well, but it was like throwing droplets into hell itself. The flames were too fierce, too hungry. Panicked bleating cut through the chaos as several sheep burst from the barn, their wool singed. The grey mare Justin loved so well followed, eyes wild with terror. She galloped past the gathered crowd and vanished into the night. More neighbors arrived with buckets, but their efforts seemed futile against the growing inferno. The wind shifted, carrying sparks toward the orchard. Lily watched in despair as the first tree caught fire, then another. The flames leaped from branch to branch, devouring the fruit of their labor. "Justin!" she screamed, realizing he hadn't emerged. "Justin, where are you?" Through the smoke, she spotted him struggling with the barn door, trying to save more animals. He was coughing violently, barely able to stand. Without thinking, Lily ran to him. The heat was unbearable, but she grabbed his arm and pulled with all her might. "Leave it!" she pleaded. "Please, Justin, come away!" He resisted for a moment, then collapsed against her. Together they stumbled to safety as the barn roof caved in with a thunderous crash, sending a fountain of sparks into the night sky. Lily helped Justin to the ground a safe distance away. His face was streaked with soot, and angry red burns marked his hands and forearms. He stared at the destruction, wheezing with every breath, his eyes reflecting the flames that devoured their dreams. Through the long hours until dawn, they could only watch. The bucket brigade fought to save what they could of the orchard, but by morning's light, the full extent of devastation became clear. The barn was nothing but smoking ruins. Half the orchard was charred beyond recovery. Most of their livestock was gone. As the sun rose, whispers circulated among the gathered neighbors. Some had seen strange men riding away just before the fire was discovered. Others mentioned railroad workers drinking at the saloon, boasting about taking care of problems. But there was no proof, only suspicions that dared not be voiced too loudly. Justin sat motionless by the blackened remnants of the barn, his burned hands limp in his lap. Lily tried to tend his wounds, applying cool cloths and soothing salve, but he barely seemed to notice. The strong, gentle man who had proposed to her just hours before was lost in a dark place she couldn't reach. "God has forsaken us," he muttered, his voice hollow. "All these years of faithful service, of living simply and honestly." He closed his eyes, pain etching deep lines in his face. And this is his answer. "Don't say such things," Lily whispered, her heart breaking at his words. "The Lord tests us, but he never abandons us." But Justin turned away from her comfort, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Hours passed, and still he sat there, occasionally murmuring prayers that sounded more like accusations. Lily brought him water and bread, which he left untouched. She felt helpless watching him retreat into himself, yet something fierce burned in her heart. They had found love among these trees, discovered hope in each other's company. She would not let that be destroyed as easily as timber and wood. While Justin sat in his dark contemplation, Lily worked. She salvaged what she could from the ruins, collected the few sheep that had returned, and tended to Justin's burns despite his resistance. Between tasks, she prayed, not with Justin's bitter questions, but with determined faith that somehow they would find a way forward through this trial. Morning crept over the homestead, pale and cheerless as ash. Lily moved through the kitchen with leaden steps, taking inventory of their meager supplies. The fire had consumed more than just the barn. Smoke had seeped into their stored food, spoiling much of what they'd put away for winter. She managed to salvage enough for a simple breakfast, the last of their cornmeal and 2 wrinkled apples. Justin sat at the kitchen table, his burned hands wrapped in clean cloth, staring unseeing at the wall. He hadn't spoken more than a few words since yesterday's devastation. When Lily set a bowl before him, he barely seemed to notice. "You need to eat," she said softly. "Keep up your strength." He picked at the cornmeal mush without interest. Through the window, the charred skeleton of their barn stood stark against the morning sky. Beyond it, the ruined orchard stretched like a graveyard of trees. Hoofbeats approached from the road. 3 of their closest neighbors rode up, leading their horses to the water trough. They dismounted slowly, hats in hands, faces drawn with sympathy but offering little else. "Terrible business," said old Mr. Peterson, shaking his head. "Just terrible. If there's anything we can do," Mrs. Baker added, though her voice trailed off uncertainly. Lily thanked them with all the grace she could muster, but their discomfort was plain. Everyone knew who likely set the fire, but no one dared speak against the railroad's influence. After awkward pleasantries, they mounted up and rode away, leaving only dust and pity in their wake. The sun climbed higher, and still Justin sat, lost in his thoughts. He wandered out to the orchard around midday, moving like a ghost between the blackened trees. Lily watched him from the porch, her heart aching at his defeat. "We should ride to the county seat," she suggested when he finally returned. "Show them the patent. Demand justice." Justin shook his head slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. "What good would it do? They have money, power, men with guns. We have nothing but ashes. We have truth, Lily insisted. We have right on our side. But Justin turned away, retreating back into silence. Lily watched him shuffle towards the house, shoulders bowed under an invisible weight. In that moment, something hardened in her heart, not against Justin, but against the injustice that had broken this good man's spirit. That evening, while Justin dozed in his chair, Lily lit a candle and retrieved the land patent copy from its hiding place. Her hands trembled slightly as she tucked it into her leather satchel, along with a few provisions and her mother's old Bible. The decision felt both terrifying and right, like stepping off a cliff with faith that wings would sprout. She barely slept that night, listening to the crickets chirp and planning her journey. The county seat was 2 days' ride away. She'd made the trip once before, years ago, with her first husband. The route was etched in her memory like an old map. Dawn painted the sky in watercolor shades when Lily crept to the stable. The mare, their only remaining horse, nickered softly as Lily approached with saddle and bridle. Her hands remembered the motions from her younger days, though they weren't as quick or sure as they once were. "Lily?" Justin's voice startled her. He stood in the stable doorway, confusion plain on his face. "What are you doing?" She straightened her back, cinching the saddle tight. "If you cannot fight, then I must." But his protest was weak, uncertainty clouding his eyes. "You can't ride all that way alone. It isn't safe. Neither is letting them steal everything we love." Lily's voice was gentle but firm. She mounted carefully, gathering the reins in practiced hands. "I won't let them win without a fight, Justin. Not while I have breath in my body." The sun was just breaking over the horizon as Lily guided the mare onto the dusty road. She didn't look back, though her heart ached to. The steady rhythm of hoofbeats became her companion as miles stretched behind her. By mid-morning, the heat pressed down like a heavy blanket. Lily stopped at a creek to rest and water the horse. Kneeling by the burbling water, she whispered prayers into the current, for safety, for courage, for justice. Most of all, she prayed for Justin's faith to return, like water to parched earth. Dusk was falling when she spotted the way station, a humble building with a lantern glowing in the window. The station master, an elderly man with kind eyes, offered her space in the hayloft for the night. Lily climbed the ladder carefully, her bones protesting the day's hard ride. Settled in the sweet-smelling hay, she pulled her shawl close against the cooling air. The patent rested safely in her satchel beside her head. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, but for now, determination burned steady in her heart like a guiding star. She would see this through, no matter what came. The county courthouse loomed before Lily, its red brick walls catching the mid-morning sun. Her muscles ached from 2 days of hard riding, but determination straightened her spine as she climbed the weathered steps. The mare, safely tied at the hitching post, nickered softly behind her. Inside, cool shadows wrapped around her like a shawl. The marble floors echoed with each step as she approached the clerk's desk, clutching her satchel close. Behind the high wooden counter, a thin man with wire-rimmed spectacles barely glanced up from his ledger. "Court's in session," he drawled, his eyes taking in her dust-covered dress and plain bonnet. The corner of his mouth twitched. "Come back tomorrow." Lily squared her shoulders. "I have urgent business regarding a land patent dispute. The railroad company is trying to steal my friend's property through fraud." The clerk's sneer deepened. "And you rode all this way alone?" "At your age." "Age has nothing to do with justice," Lily replied firmly. "I need to see the judge." Something in her voice must have carried weight, for the clerk sighed and disappeared through a heavy door. Minutes stretched like molasses until he returned, beckoning her forward with obvious reluctance. The courtroom felt vast and imposing. Morning light streamed through tall windows, catching dust motes in its beams. At the front, Judge Harrison sat behind his massive desk, steel grey hair and stern expression making Lily's heart flutter. But she thought of Justin, of their ruined barn and scorched orchard, and found her courage. "Your Honor," she began, her voice clear despite her nervousness. "I bring evidence of fraud against Justin Yoder's homestead." Railroad representatives sat in the front row. She recognized Samuel Carter among them, his expensive suit a stark contrast to her simple dress. They whispered and smirked as she approached the judge's bench. With trembling fingers, Lily withdrew the patent from her satchel. "This document proves, Mr. Yoder's legal ownership of the land the railroad claims. It was deliberately hidden to force him off his property." Judge Harrison accepted the paper, studying it through his spectacles while the railroad men shifted uneasily. Carter stood suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Your Honor, this is preposterous," he declared. "This woman has no standing here. That document is clearly forged." The judge held up his hand for silence, continuing to examine the patent. His frown deepened as he compared it to other papers on his desk. "These dates don't align with the railroad's claim," he mused aloud. Lily's heart leapt, but before she could speak, the courtroom door creaked open. Footsteps echoed through the chamber as Preacher Matthews entered, removing his hat as he walked forward. His presence sent a ripple of murmurs through the room. "Your Honor," the preacher said, bowing slightly. "I've ridden hard to be here. When I learned Mrs. Hale had gone to seek justice, I felt compelled to follow and speak truth." Carter's face darkened. "This is highly irregular. I'll hear him." Judge Harrison interrupted, gesturing for the preacher to continue. Preacher Matthews stepped forward, his worn Bible tucked under one arm. "I've known Justin Yoder since he first came to our territory. He filed that patent proper and legal. I witnessed it myself. When the railroad men came, they tried buying his land for a pittance. When he refused, strange things started happening, documents disappearing, threats in the night. Just 2 days ago, his barn was burned to the ground." The judge's expression hardened at this last revelation. He turned to Carter, who had gone pale beneath his fancy collar. "These are serious accusations, Mr. Carter." "Baseless slander," Carter sputtered, but his confidence had cracked. "We have followed every legal procedure, including arson?" Lily found herself speaking, surprising even herself with the steel in her voice. The room fell silent. Judge Harrison cleared his throat, gathering the papers before him into a neat stack. "I will review these documents thoroughly tonight. We will reconvene tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock for my ruling." His gavel cracked against wood, the sound sharp as a gunshot. As people began filing out, Lily remained rooted to the spot, her legs trembling with exhaustion and emotion. Preacher Matthews appeared at her elbow, offering quiet support. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. "The Lord works in mysterious ways." He replied with a gentle smile. "I can offer you a bed at my sister's house for the night." Lily nodded gratefully, her strength finally faltering now that her task was done. But as she turned to leave, she closed her eyes briefly in silent prayer. Not for herself, but for Justin, for their land, for justice to prevail. In her heart she felt a flutter of hope, as delicate and precious as a butterfly's wing. Morning sunlight streamed through the courthouse windows, painting golden stripes across the packed wooden benches. Lily sat in the front row, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, the worn fabric of her dress still bearing dust from her long ride. Around her, the courtroom buzzed with whispered conversations as townsfolk filed in, drawn by news of the unusual case. Samuel Carter and his railroad associates occupied the opposite side. their expensive suits and confident smirks a stark contrast to Lily's simple presence. She kept her eyes forward, focusing on the empty judge's bench while trying to still her racing heart. Preacher Matthews sat nearby, his Bible resting on his knee, offering silent support. The bailiff's voice rang out, "All rise for the Honourable Judge Harrison." The room rustled as everyone stood. Judge Harrison swept in, his black robes catching the morning light. He settled behind his desk with deliberate movements, adjusting his spectacles as he surveyed the crowded room. "Be seated," he commanded, his voice carrying to the furthest corner. The scratch of boots and rustle of skirts filled the air as people settled. "I have reviewed the evidence presented yesterday regarding the land dispute between Mr. Justin Yoder and the Western Railroad Company." Judge Harrison lifted the patent document, now looking worn at the edges from handling. "This patent, dated 5 years ago, bears all proper seals and signatures. It was filed correctly and legally witnessed." Carter shifted in his seat, his jaw tightening. The judge continued, his tone growing stern. "Furthermore, evidence suggests deliberate attempts to conceal this document from official records." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the railroad men. This court cannot ignore such troubling implications. Lily's fingers pressed together until her knuckles whitened. The judge cleared his throat. "Therefore, it is the ruling of this court that Justin Yoder's land patent is valid and binding. All rights to the property in question are restored to him in full. The railroad's claim is hereby dismissed." The words hung in the air for a moment before the room erupted in murmurs. Some faces showed relief, others disappointment. A few farmers in the back nodded approvingly, while Carter and his associates huddled together, speaking in harsh whispers. Lily stood on shaky legs, tears welling in her eyes. "Thank you, Your Honor," she said, her voice wavering but clear. "Thank you for seeing justice done." Judge Harrison nodded once, a hint of kindness softening his stern features. "Truth will out, Mrs. Hale, always." Outside, the morning air felt fresh and sweet. Lily descended the courthouse steps slowly, her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. The mare waited patiently at the hitching post, tossing her head in greeting. As Lily checked the saddle straps, preparing for the long ride home, hoofbeats approached from the main road. She turned, shading her eyes against the sun, and her heart leaped. Justin sat astride a borrowed horse, his clothes and beard dusty from hard riding. He dismounted quickly, his usually steady hands trembling as he tied his horse beside hers. "Lily," he said softly, crossing the distance between them. "I couldn't let you face this alone." She noticed the shadows under his eyes, evidence of a sleepless night and long journey. "The judge ruled in our favor," she told him, tears finally spilling over. "The land is yours, safe and legal." Justin shook his head, reaching for her hands. "I was wrong to despair," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "When you rode away, I realized something important. Losing the land would have been hard, but losing you?" He paused, struggling to find words. "I feared that more." There in the courthouse yard, before God and everyone, Justin pulled her into an embrace. Lily felt his strength, his warmth, the steady beat of his heart against her cheek. She didn't care about the stares from passers-by or the whispers from the courthouse steps. "You saved everything," Justin whispered. "The land, yes, but more than that. You saved my faith when I'd lost it. You showed me what true courage looks like." They held each other for a long moment before slowly stepping apart. Justin helped Lily mount her horse, his hands gentle and sure. He swung up onto his own mount, and together they turned toward home. The morning sun warmed their backs as they rode side by side down the dusty road. Ahead lay many miles, but neither felt the distance as a burden. Their horses walked steadily, hooves raising small puffs of dust with each step. The future stretched before them like the open road, uncertain in its details but rich with promise. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Justin's homestead as wagons rolled in from every direction. Men carried tools and lumber, while women balanced covered dishes and quilts. The sound of hammering filled the air as neighbors worked together, raising new beams where the burned barn once stood. Lily watched from the farmhouse porch, her heart full at the sight of so many helping hands. Just days ago, these same people had whispered and stared. Now they labored shoulder to shoulder, rebuilding what hatred had destroyed. Justin moved among the workers, his strength returning day by day. Though his hands still bore healing burns, he lifted boards and steadied posts alongside younger men. His quiet voice offered direction when needed, and his eyes often sought Lily's across the busy yard. Sarah Miller, the preacher's wife, settled beside Lily with a fresh baked apple pie. "The Lord works in mysterious ways," she said softly. "Who would have thought that fire could bring us all together like this?" As evening approached, lanterns were hung from the newly raised rafters. Their warm light transformed the skeleton of the barn into something almost magical. Women spread quilts and tablecloths, setting out dishes of fried chicken, cornbread, and sweet potato pie. Justin called everyone to gather, his voice carrying across the yard. The crowd of nearly 50 neighbors formed a circle, their faces glowing in the lantern light. "I want to thank you all," he began, his words careful and measured. "Your kindness shows me God's love made real." Then, to Lily's surprise, he turned and walked toward her. The crowd grew quiet as Justin took her hands in his. His palms were rough from the day's work, but his touch was gentle. "Lily Hale," he said, his voice strong enough for all to hear. "You rode out alone to fight for justice. You believed when I lost faith. You brought light back to this dark place." He paused, drawing a deep breath. "I'm asking you now, before God and our neighbors, will you marry me? Not from pity or duty, but because I love you with all my heart." Lily felt tears warm on her cheeks as she looked into his earnest face. "Yes," she answered clearly. "Yes, I will." The barn erupted in cheers and applause. Women rushed forward to hug Lily while men clapped Justin on the back. Someone started singing Amazing Grace, and others joined in, their voices rising to the rafters of the new barn. As they shared supper together, Lily noticed the orchard through the barn's open doors. Though many trees still showed scars from the fire, tiny white blossoms had begun to appear on the surviving branches. Like their love, life was returning, stronger than before. Weeks passed, and spring painted the land in fresh colors. The orchard hummed with busy bees, their gentle buzzing a promise of sweet fruit to come. Tiny blossoms dotted the branches like scattered snowflakes, their delicate perfume carrying on the morning breeze. The church bells rang clear and bright across the valley. Inside the simple wooden building, Lily stood before a mirror in the back room, smoothing the folds of her dress. She had sewn it herself from cream-colored fabric, adding tiny pearl buttons down the front and delicate lace at the collar. Her grey-streaked hair was neatly pinned beneath a white cap trimmed with satin ribbon. The same pews that once held whispers of judgment now filled with smiling faces. Justin waited at the altar, his black suit pressed, his beard neatly trimmed. His eyes found Lily's as she walked down the aisle, and the love in his gaze made her steps steady and sure. Preacher Miller's voice carried through the sunlit church. "God's providence brings second chances," he declared. "Through faith and patience, what seems lost can bloom again." The congregation nodded, remembering Lily's courage and Justin's renewed spirit. After exchanging their vows, the newlyweds stepped out into the bright morning. Cheers and blessings followed them down the church steps, where flower petals rained upon their heads. That evening, they shared their first meal as husband and wife in their farmhouse kitchen. Fresh baked bread steamed on the table, its homey scent mixing with the sweet orchard air that drifted through open windows. Lamplight cast a warm glow across their faces as Justin reached for Lily's hand. "You were never a second choice," he said softly. "You were God's choice." Lily squeezed his fingers, remembering that lonely day at the train station that now seemed so long ago. After supper, they walked together among the flowering trees, their matched footsteps carrying them forward into their shared tomorrow. Above them, stars began to peek through the twilight sky, as eternal as the hope in their hearts. Thanks for being here. If this story stirred something in you, a memory, a feeling, a truth, go ahead and subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow with another moment that just might speak to your soul.